Welcome back to Torah on the Go. Whether you are on your Peloton or walking your dog or stuck in traffic, we are glad that you are taking a moment out of your day to learn Torah with me and Rabbi Feinstein.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Thanks for taking the time to learn.
Some people like to listen to us on iTunes or Spotify, and some people like to listen to us on YouTube. And that means that some people like to look at us while we're talking, and some people prefer our radio voices. We should definitely send out a poll to see why it is that people choose one or the other. Now, that's some of my internal thoughts that have no filter anymore. It's season 2. I can just talk directly to the audience. Okay, so we are about to begin the book of Exodus, Sefer Shemot, the second book of the Torah. And before we begin, like any good teacher, we want to review first what we learned last season and talk about the relationship between Sefer Bereshit and Sefer Shemot, the relationship between the book of Genesis and the book of Exodus, and how it is that they sit in agreement with one another in terms of worldview, in terms of their message, what they have to say, what they have to teach us about who we are as a people, and also, perhaps, they don't agree. Perhaps there's disagreement, there's discord between the two books, between the two different worldviews. And so I'll begin with this framing, and then you can take it, reject it, use it, love it, throw it in the garbage, whatever you'd like. So I'd say that Genesis is a family album. Mm-hmm. Genesis is the story of a family. It's a saga. And Exodus is the origin of peoplehood. Exodus is the beginning of our Thanksgiving narrative. Yeah. And those serve different purposes, although they are essentially about the same family. In both, they come to say two different things about the world. What say you, Rabbi? Well,
first of all, I want to make a political comment, which I know is a little off color, but it's important that we off topic rather. So, but it's important that we notice this. One of the claims that is made in the world now, denying the importance of Zionism, the legitimacy of Zionism, is to say, you Jews are not a people, you Jews are a religion. And as a religion, you are not entitled to the right of self-determination. You're not entitled to a homeland. And I want to point out what you just mentioned, which is a small point, but it's so important at this moment of our argument with that part of the world. We call ourselves a people from the first words of this book of Shemot. In fact, ironically, the first person to call us a people was Pharaoh.
That's right.
He says, Am B'nai Yisrael. Am B'nai Yisrael. We are a self-conscious people. And it's important to recognize that. It's important that we have a sense of family connection, of peoplehood connection, of responsibility for each other. I remember when they were beginning to liberate the Jews of Ethiopia, and the community here in LA, America, began to contribute to that thing. Now, first, I've never been to Ethiopia. The Jews of Ethiopia, I dare say, look a little different than me. They're much more beautiful. They're tall and dark and gorgeous and remarkable, and their culture is different. Their food is different. Their ways are different, and yet they're my people. We contributed. We fought for that because it was important to liberate our people. That sense of peoplehood, it begins in this book of Shemot. It's affirmed in this book of Shemot, this book of Exodus. And it's important at this moment that anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand how we have self-defined, how we have defined ourselves, what we've called ourselves for the last 3,800 years. Now, the question you ask is a wonderful question. How do the two books contrast? It's just a wonderful question. In Genesis, we're a family. A family is tied together by blood. And the first words of the book of Exodus say, these are the names of the children of Jacob, who children of Israel went down into Egypt, and it's his family. That's one tie that we feel, which is this tie of blood. It's a deep mystical tie. But then there's something else. When we move from being a family to being a people, there's another layer of connection. And the layer of connection is narrative. It is the way that a people is held together across generations and across continents is that we all tell the same story about ourselves. And the book of Exodus is that story. The two principal stories that we tell, the Exodus from Egypt and the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, are the two stories that define our people. That's why people can join us. If we were just family, you'd never be able to become a Jew. You're either born into it or you're not. It's like becoming an honorary Irishman or something. You know, you can wear green on St. Patrick's Day, but that don't make you Irish if your name is Feinstein, right? On the other hand, we welcome people from the outside. All we ask that they do is tell the story in the first person, right? Because of what God did for me when I came out of Egypt. If you say that about yourself, if the first line of your CV, of your resume, of your autobiography is, I was a slave in the land of Egypt and God freed me from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, you're welcome to become part of the Jewish people. By enforcing narrative as the connection between us, we create a whole different dynamic in our people. Because family contains the obligation to hang out with your family and protect your family, even the parts of them you don't like so much. But peoplehood comes with a whole set of responsibilities, because that story then obligates us in many different ways. We'll be talking about this year, how the story of Exodus obligates us to live a certain life, to aspire to certain goals in the world. The difference is family and peoplehood. You have it exactly right.
And I think that as we talk about family and peoplehood, family brings about a certain set of values that are important, right? So, leadership and loyalty and transmitting values to the next generation and teaching children and raising children. These are all aspects of Genesis that get taught to us. Peoplehood, especially Jewish peoplehood, faith is introduced in Exodus that did not exist necessarily in Genesis. Right? There is no child in Genesis that steps forward and says, why must I believe? Or, when will God reveal God's self to me? Genesis doesn't answer that question. God simply reveals God's self to the entire family, to all the generations of the family. But Joseph represents a transitional figure in the sense that Joseph never receives direct revelation from God. He experiences dreams and he undergoes it. And so that transition to a next generation, even removed from Joseph, the entirety of the people is not going to experience God's direct revelation to them. They'll see God's wonders in the world, but now we're going to transition to a leadership model that is a national peoplehood model, in the sense that Moses was not the oldest. This isn't a family scenario anymore. Moses is not, the firstborn of the first tribe of the first of the first. Moses was simply the most worthy. We don't understand necessarily why, when he was, why that is that he's the most worthy, but the Torah goes to answer that over the next 4 books. Right? He was the most worthy, the greatest leader, and essentially, Judaism begins to work itself into this kind of complex system where we believe in meritocracy and we also believe in lineage.
Very good.
Right? Aaron's lineage, Moses' meritocracy.
Right.
We believe at the same time we are a people and we are a family. Am B'nai Yisrael. It's a very clunky sentence. It means that we are a nation of the family of Israel.
Right.
And we exist as Jews in this kind of in-between, this in-between.
Yeah, and not only is there a difference in leadership, that was very well said, there's also a difference in the quality of connection, in covenant, basically. You're in a family because you were born into the family. Nothing was asked of you. You're just born into the family. You are it, right? And when we talk about being Jewish, that's what we mean. But then there's another piece, and that's what you get in Exodus, which is the covenant of Exodus adds a word, and the word is if. And that is, it's conditional on what you need to do. You need to act in a certain way. You need to behave in a certain way. So if Genesis is being Jewish, Exodus is doing Jewish. They're both necessary. There's a Genesis part of our Jewishness, and there's an Exodus part of our Jewishness. Sure. And when we welcome folks into our community, when we teach our children, we teach them both. You're a member of the family. We love you. We're going to protect you. And it's very hard to get out of this family, by the way. On the other hand, we expect a lot of you. We expect a lot of you. We expect you to be rising, aspiring, growing deeper, growing and elevating your spirit. There's a lot expected of you. Being Jewish, doing Jewish. That's the next piece of the harmony between these. It's complex, but it's very, very important.
So the other major difference, and this goes along the lines of being Jewish versus doing Jewish, is the family saga of Genesis. We don't often talk about this, but last week we talked about Simchas Torah. The entire family saga of Genesis, they don't have the Torah. If you were to understand the Torah in its linear fashion, the Torah does not arrive till Exodus 19. Mm-hmm. And so the generation that walks out of Egypt receives the Torah. They receive a set of instructions, a teaching.
Yeah.
That drives them forward. Mm-hmm. Whether you understand it to be the Ten Commandments or whether you understand it to be the Torah or whatever, however you understand that revelation scene at Exodus 19, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about it over the course of the season, this generation receives the Torah in the sense that they receive a set of instructions that they are to live by. And in Genesis, it's very much intuition. Abraham believes that his family should live a certain way. He teaches that to Isaac and Ishmael, right? Isaac carries it forward in terms of the covenant, and Isaac tries to teach it to his two sons in Jacob and Esau, and again, it's the younger one who takes it forward. And Jacob tries to teach it to his 12 sons, and there's trials and tribulations that ensue. Here we receive an instruction manual. It's not up to family intuition anymore. We're all going to live by a certain code. Mm-hmm. And once that code is delivered, it's very difficult to say, I didn't know what was expected of me. Mm. There's a standard or a standardization in kind of the peoplehood of Exodus that doesn't exist in the family nature. I mean, my kids always say to me, you don't treat us the same, right? I say, I treat you equal, but I don't treat you the same.
Yeah.
Right? We want the best for all of you, and we want to hold you all to high standards. And we know that you're all different people, and we have to treat you. We treat you differently. There's different expectation, and a lot of that is I think the way that that's an Exodus world. An Exodus worldview is we should all have the same expectation, even if we're not all the same.
Yeah. It's interesting, the one of the interesting questions that follows from this really interesting question of Genesis versus Exodus is like, who is the ancestor? Where do we start? Where does the story start, right? We like to think of ourselves, I think the rabbinic tradition that you and I are the heirs to, likes to start the story at the revelation at Mount Sinai with the rules. Rabbis are nuts about rules all the time. The Christian community, which rejected the rules, went back to Abraham and said it's all about the grace of God choosing Abraham without any rules, right? And the real question is, what story do you tell about yourself? It's a fascinating question, by the way, for individuals. Stop for just a moment and digress. It's, when you meet somebody on an airplane and strike up a conversation, or you're sitting with someone at a business meeting, and before the business starts, you just say, tell me, who are you? Tell me about yourself. It's just the most fascinating thing to pay attention to the story a person tells about themselves and what that, of all the different narratives. Any human being is really the repository of thousands of narratives. Where do you start this story? Do you start the story at your own birth or where you went to high school? Or does the story start with your parents and their parents? Right? Where did you come from? How did you get here? Is it a happy story or a difficult story, a sad story? What we're reading here are the stories we told about ourselves, we tell about ourselves. And look at these stories, just remarkable stories, right? Not one of the ancestors is a king. Not one of the ancestors is a conqueror, right? Not one of the it's all about a very modest people. Arami Oved Avi, says Deuteronomy, right? My ancestor was a wandering schlepper from somewhere far away, and suddenly finding the relationship with his God, finding ourselves first in Canaan, where we were a small minority in a big majority culture, and then finding ourselves here in Pharaoh's Egypt, where we become enslaved. It's just a fascinating thing that this is the story we chose, you know? I often think if I rewrote the Bible, I would have told it differently, you know? Made ourselves rulers of the universe of somehow. But to say, no, I began as a slave. What does that imply? What does that bring me? What sensibility as I walk the world does that bring me? That's what's so very interesting here.
To just build off of that, Moses is such a very different introduction than Isaac, Jacob, all of the children that are born in the book of Genesis. We'll talk about Moses' birth story, but he evolves into a very different type of leader, a very different type of leader. I always think of Moses as perhaps more modern than Abraham. They're not separated by that many generations, but it feels like Moses speaks to us, and Abraham and Sarah are like, you know, our grandparents or our great grandparents, something in black and white photos.
That's very good.
And for me, at least, the story tells of a personal journey. I mean, before I often tell the story, what the parshiot that really pulled me into studying Torah were the journeys of Abraham and Sarah. And then when I became a rabbi, you're 100% right. Rabbinical school reorients you to see yourself, or I should say the best of rabbinical school reorients you to see yourself in the tradition of Moses. And then certainly leading a synagogue orients you to see and learn from Moses. It makes you far more empathetic to all of his frustrations.
Did they give you that stick that if you touch the ground, it opens up?
They did not. I must have missed that class. I'll call Rabbi Artson and Rabbi Peretz and try to get a refund. I missed that class. But I tell you that sometimes you need a good magic staff as a rabbi. That would be great.
No kidding. I think it's so very important. I think your image is wonderful. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, even Joseph are in sepia tone. They're the old photos on my wall. Moses already is a character. He comes with in some ways, Abraham is two-dimensional. You know, God calls him when he's 75 years old, says, follow me. He says, yes. Everything God tells him to do, he does.
Right.
It's wonderful, but it's like, Moses, God calls to Moses. We'll get to this in a few chapters. God calls to Moses and have a job for you. He says, nah, I got other things to do. There's an inner life to this, man, that we can identify with. It's the struggle of becoming a leader. It's the struggle of finding faith. I mean, there's a moment in Moses' biography, and we'll get to this in some months from now, when he turns to God and says, Hareini et kvodecha, show me your glory. Show me who you are. Right. Moses has his own internal religious crisis in the course of this, and he's a fully formed human character with all of the reservations and all of the difficulties and struggles that we have inside of us. And the story is not ashamed to show you that.
No.
It's not ashamed. And that's if you want to know one of the great things about the Torah, that's one of the great things about the Torah. I mean, religious characters in so many other religious narratives, and they're all beautiful, don't get me wrong, and I respect them greatly, but there's no inner struggle.
Right.
This man, who is the greatest Jew, the most realized human being who ever lived, he struggles. He's going to struggle, and that's what this book is going to show us.
And not only does he struggle, but we struggle.
Yes.
I mean, part of the difference between Genesis and Exodus is that in Exodus, it's really the story about specific people who are leading this massive Greek chorus.
Yeah.
Right? So the Jewish people become the Greek chorus, and we move into the background. There was a great movie called Almost Famous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a scene where they produce these T-shirts, and there's the lead singer's face is in the front, and then everybody else is kind of like out of focus in the background, and the band goes crazy, right? They all go crazy. And Exodus is the changing from the T-shirt where you see all the faces of the family to you see Moses' face, and all of us are kind of in the background, out of focus.
Right.
We also have great challenge moving into that position. We experience challenges. We have anxieties. We undergo the same process, and we all seem to grow together.
Yeah. I think that's a really wonderful point about the difference between these two books, right? This is the story becomes much more accessible and much more human. I mean, Abraham is this paragon of faith, but in some ways he's far, far beyond our reach.
Right.
Far beyond our reach. But these are people who are struggling with fear and struggling with their aspirations and struggling with envy and struggling with all of the dark sides of the human soul and still trying to become that holy people that God charged them to be.
And I think in some ways we're still trying.
Absolutely.
That's why we keep reading this book over and over. We're still trying.
Absolutely. We're still there.
And so we look forward to opening the book of Exodus with you and studying this season. And I think that you will recognize yourself in this narrative. In so many ways, we learn about who we are as a people, and we struggle to become that holy nation each and every day.
I hope you find that stick they gave you.
I'll look in my closet.
Right.
See you next week.